Gana Raghunathan Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Nitinamine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauratvashe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha kalpa tarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So does anyone have any questions on chapter 7 and 8?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes.
It is written that you have to worship the demigod Ganpati before you execute the devotional service.
Okay, that's a commonly asked question. So, for what one should worship Ganpati?
To remove the
all the vignas.
So you read what Prabhupada has written.
He worships the lotus feet of Lord Narasimha.
Yes, that's right. So that's what we are doing. Right?
Thank you.
So Ganpati is getting the power to remove obstacles from Lord Narasimha. So therefore we are directly worshipping Narasimha. That is what Srila Prabhupada has taught us. And when Ganpati gets his powers from him only. Right?
Yes.
Another question?
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Regarding confidential knowledge, that's what we discussed in the last session. I have a bit confusion whether that we are the soul, we are not the body. That is the confidential knowledge. Just the different this devotional service.
Yeah. So both. So if you read the purport to 9.2 Bhagavad Gita, then Srila Prabhupada is explaining Rajaguyam. So so this is also confidential. Knowing that one is spirit, soul, not the body, that is also confidential. And of course, it does not end with that. Then understanding the relationship of the spirit soul with the Supreme Lord, that is also confidential. Okay, so there Srila Prabhupada explains that, well, most people, of course, don't even understand the presence of the spirit soul. Because that knowledge is not being taught in modern day schools and colleges. Srila Prabhupada often spoke of Professor Kotowski, such a big professor, but still he said that, Swamiji, after this body, everything is finished. So most people do not even know about the presence of the soul. And then Srila Prabhupada explains, okay, even if some people know about the presence of the soul, then there are so many misconceptions. The soul merges into the absolute truth. The soul has no form. So many misconceptions. So therefore, the knowledge about the presence of the spirit soul is also confidential. And even more confidential is the relationship of the spirit soul with the Supreme. That is even more confidential.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Anything else? Okay, fine. So if there are no questions, we're proceeding with chapter 9. Further considerations of devotional principles. So what can you see on the screen?
Srila Prabhupada picture.
Prabhupada.
Okay. Now,
Sadhuninda.
okay, fine. So now somebody can read from the book Blasphemy.
Blasphemy. One should not tolerate blasphemy of Lord or his devotees. In this connection, in the 10th canto, 74th chapter, verse of 40 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Sukadeva Goswami tells Parikshit Maharaj, "My dear king, if a person, after hearing blasphemous propaganda against the Lord and his devotees, does not go away from that place, he becomes bereft of the effect of all pious activities." Hare Krishna, shall continue, Prabhu.
Yes. Till the
In one
end
of the
of it.
Lord Chaitanya Sixtashtaka verses, it is stated the devotee should be more tolerant than the tree and more submissive than the grass. He should offer all honor to others, but may not accept any honor for him. In spite of Lord Chaitanya being so humble and meek as a devotee, when he was informed about injuries inflicted on the body of Sri Nityananda, he immediately ran to the spot and wanted to kill the offenders, Jagai and Madhai. This behavior of Lord Chaitanya is very significant. It shows that Vaishnava may be very tolerant and meek for foregoing everything for his personal honor. But when it is a question of honor of Krishna or his devotees, he will not tolerate any insult. There are three ways of dealing with such insults. If someone is heard blaspheming by words, one should be so expert that he can defeat the opposing party by argument. If he is unable to defeat the opposing party, then the next step is that he should not just stand there meekly, but should give up his life. This third process is followed if he is unable to execute the above mentioned two process, and this is that he must leave the place and go away. If a devotee does not follow any of the above mentioned three processes, he falls down from his position of devotion.
Okay, fine. So this is about blaspheming a devotee. Basically, it's called Sadhu Ninda. So then the question is, who's a sadhu? So we're talking about blaspheming a devotee, but first of all, we must know who's a devotee, who's a sadhu. So what's your understanding? Who's a sadhu?
Should we tolerate
Vaishnava.
Vaishnava is a translation, but who is?
Very tolerant.
Follows the parampara.
Those who follow scriptures are sadhus.
Okay, those who follow scriptures, those who follow parampara. Okay, fine. Any other answer?
Always in pure devotion.
Your devotion. Okay. Okay, that's correct. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur is explaining in the Harinam Chintamani who's a sadhu. So who's a devotee, who's a sadhu? The primary characteristic, the principal characteristic is Krishna Ekasharanam, surrender to Krishna and his name. This is the Swarup Lakshan of a devotee, of a Vaishnava. And the secondary characteristics are the other 25 qualities of a devotee that Lord Chaitanya describes to Sanatana Goswami. Okay, so the most important characteristic of a devotee is that he has surrendered to Krishna. That means surrender to Guru, following his instructions. So that is the main characteristic of a Vaishnava. Okay, so the other qualities will eventually come. But the main primary quality of the devotee is that he is surrendered to Krishna. So there's a Swarup Lakshan and all the others are Tatastha Lakshan. So if one has the principal qualification of surrender to Krishna, but if he doesn't have all of the secondary qualifications to the full extent, he is still considered a devotee. As one continues chanting, the secondary qualifications eventually fully manifest. Okay, so the secondary qualifications are all the wonderful qualities of the spirit soul, being part and parcel of Krishna. So as the material contamination covering the spirit soul gets slowly eradicated, then all the wonderful qualities of the spirit soul become manifest. So now we're talking about such a sadhu. If we criticize him, bear bad feelings towards him, or hear him criticized, we're involved in sadhunanda. So three things. So either if we criticize him, or even bear bad feelings towards him. Of course, if we bear bad feelings, eventually it may come out as criticism. Or hear him criticized, then we are involved in sadhunanda. So blaspheming a devotee incurs the anger of Krishna. So because the devotee is very dear to Krishna, when the devotee is blasphemed, then Krishna becomes very upset and angry. As we know the famous example of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvas Muni. So because Ambarish Maharaj, very dear devotee of the Lord, so therefore when Durvas Muni tried to kill him, then Krishna's anger was invoked. And then he sent the Sudarshan Chakra. So if we hear blasphemy, then what should be done? We just read that from Srila Prabhupada's book. So the first thing is one should defeat the opposing party by argument. If one is not able to do that, if he is unable to defeat the opposing party, one should give up his life. And if he is unable to execute the above mentioned two process, one must leave the place and go away. If a devotee does not follow any of the above mentioned three processes, he falls down from his position of devotion. So of course, for devotees, the second one is not recommended, because giving up one's life is, for a Vaishnava, is as good as Brahma Hatya, killing a Brahmana. So therefore, a devotee is never recommended to give up his life. So therefore, for us, it's basically the first one and the third one. Either we defeat the opposing party or we leave the place. That's what we do upon hearing blasphemy. So this is a purport from the 4th canto, which is talking about how different people in the Varnashram can be, should behave differently when they hear blasphemy. So this is in connection to Sati and Shiva. So we know the famous pastime of Daksha blaspheming Lord Shiva. So in that connection, Srila Prabhupada writes this purport. Somebody can please read.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. The instruction set forth here in Srimad Bhagavatam is that one should not tolerate at any cost the activities of a person who vilifies or blasphemes an authority. If one is a Brahmana, he should not give up his body, because by doing so, he would be responsible for killing a Brahmana. Therefore, a Brahmana should leave the place or block his ears so that he will not hear the blasphemy. If one happens to be a Kshatriya, he has the power to punish any man. Therefore, a Kshatriya should at once cut out the tongue of the very fire and kill him. But as far as the Vaishyas and Sudras are concerned, they should immediately give up their bodies.
Yes, so this is how different people in the Varnashram can behave differently when they hear blasphemy of Vaishnava. So this is from Giraj Maharaj's lecture. Please read.
Hare Krishna. First one must recognize one is being blasphemous. Raghunath Das Goswami gives an example of how one mistakes something bad for something good in discussing someone's someone who is bathing in ass urine and thinking that he is cleaning himself. Sometimes we discuss the faults of Vaishnava and we are thinking that actually this is very good discussion and very purifying to analyze these faults for the sake of clarifying issues to push on the movement. Sometimes it is hard to distinguish the devotional creeper from the weeds. Kutinati is the weed of duplicitous behavior and or fault finding. Raghunath Das Goswami compares it with bathing in ass urine. Duplicitous behavior means that we are making a show of devotional service with the main purpose of not praising Krishna, but to get some honor or praise so people will respect us or think we are very pure. We find fault with others to make our position more by making others' position less.
Okay. So here he is making some important points. So he says that first of all, one must recognize one is being blasphemous. So very often, even recognizing the disease becomes difficult, because usually one tends to think that what I'm doing is always perfect. So therefore, it is very difficult for one to recognize one's own faults. Srila Prabhupada also tells in one lecture, Srila Prabhupada says that therefore the author should never edit his own books. The editing should always be done by somebody else, because it's very difficult to recognize one's own faults. Therefore, even Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gave his, Ishwar Puri. Yeah, Ishwar Puri, he wrote a book and he gave it to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, at that time Nimai Pandit, for editing. So even exalted Vaishnavas do that. But the point is that it is very difficult to recognize one's own faults. One is usually under the impression that I'm perfect. And so, and another reason is one always tends to justify. So as he's saying over here, that one may find faults with the Vaishnava and justify that, oh, this is required for pushing on the movement, for helping that devotee, for helping other devotees. So many justifications may be there. So externally one may justify, but internally one may have the attitude of finding faults, criticizing, and pulling down the other Vaishnava. That may be the real intention. But externally one is posing oneself as very innocent and justifying why one is criticizing. This was exactly what Daksha Prajapati was doing. So Daksha Prajapati, when Lord Shiva does not stand up to receive him, he is extremely angry and envious. But then when he begins to blaspheme Lord Shiva, he says that, no, just for the sake of your information, for helping you, I'm just pointing out some faults of Lord Shiva. So that's how he was trying to justify his blasphemy of Lord Shiva. And so therefore, this is what is called as duplicitous behavior, kutinati. Kutinati means basically crooked behavior. So internally one has one motive, one agenda, and externally one is posing oneself to be something else. That is crooked behavior, duplicitous behavior. So internally one is, so the main reason why one wants to criticize or blaspheme is because one is envious. That is the main reason. And so one thinks that by criticizing, I'll bring down the position of the other devotee, and by that my position will automatically go up. Of course, that is an illusion. It does not happen that way. But at least one imagines that it will happen that way. So, but that's the main cause of blasphemy. And of course, throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see so many different examples of sadhu ninda, criticism and blasphemy. Can somebody say a few examples? Of course, in the Bhagavatam also we find.
Durvasamani and Ambarish Maharaj. Prabhuji.
Okay, that example we have already told. Any other examples?
Jad Bharat, Prabhuji.
What happened to Jad Bharat?
Jad Bharat was like everybody called him dumb, dull-headed, blind. They used to like criticize him, but actually he was a pure Vaishnava and Brahmana.
Okay, that is fine. That is fine. That he was behaving like a
Sorry,
dumb
Prabhuji,
person,
I
and
can't
then
hear
other
you.
people could not understand. Now, that's not called blasphemy.
Hare Krishna.
So blasphemy means out of envy when one criticizes. That is usually what is called blasphemy.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Prabhuji.
I said that, see, when people criticize Jad Bharat, that was because of ignorance, because they could not recognize him. So that's not called blasphemy. Blasphemy means when it's usually done out of envy.
Okay. But in the purports, it was written also that people were envious of Jad Bharat, but he was not envious of anybody.
Okay, so who was envious of Jad Bharat?
His stepbrothers, the 9 stepbrothers.
Of course, okay, they criticized, but anyway, that mostly they were ignorant actually. Anyway, there are that's not a very significant example. There are many more examples in the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji,
Hare Krishna.
to Lord Shiva.
Again, that was a misunderstanding. Chitraketu Maharaj did not intend to criticize or blaspheme Lord Shiva. He was just expressing surprise at Lord Shiva's behavior. He didn't intend to criticize.
Daksha Prajapati and Shiva Prabhu.
Yes, Daksha Prajapati and Shiva. Yes, we mentioned that already.
And also Brahma is also got envy of Krishna, Prabhu, in 10th canto in Vrindavan.
Okay.
I don't know whether he got
Not
doubtful
a very significant. He is. I mean, again, it's a sort of a little bit of illusion. It's not blasphemy. It's not like he was envious of Krishna. He just got a little bewildered. That's it.
Prabhu, does Indra...
Prabhuji, Romaharshan Suta and Baldev.
Okay, Romaharshan Suta and Balram. Okay.
Indra and Prudu Maharaj,
nobody has read Mahaprabhu's pastimes, it looks like.
Sorry, Prabhu, nobody has read?
Nobody has read Mahaprabhu's pastimes, it looks like. Chaitanya Charitamrita is filled with so many examples of clear-cut blasphemy.
Prabhuji, once, I don't remember the name, but a devotee blasphemes that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is eating more sweets. He's a sannyasi and there are many ants passing by.
Correct. Yes. So that was...
Pundrik Vidyanidhi and Gadadhar Pandit.
Wait, let me just finish those examples. So that is Amoga, the son-in-law of Sarvam Bhattacharya. Okay, so he was blaspheming Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And also we find Ramchandra Puri. So he was also finding faults with all the Vaishnavas, saying that they eat too much. And then later on, he started finding faults with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also. And of course, later he started finding faults even with his spiritual master, Madhavendra Puri. Yes. Somebody else was telling some other example.
Pundrik Vidyanidhi and Gadadhar Pandit.
Who blasphemed whom?
Like Gadadhar Pandit got a thought only in his mind. He never blasphemed. Just he got a thought that why he is eating that, chewing that pan and all.
Yeah, so that he didn't blaspheme. He just he was just a little bit surprised at his behavior.
In Vrindavan as well, there was this Mayavadi, right, who was blaspheming Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I don't recall the name.
Vrindavan. Anyway, so there are many other
also,
examples. There was Gopal Chapel.
Also
Gopal Chapel who
Prabhupada as
blasphemed.
well. I'm saying even Prabhupada also faced that. Right? So
Yes,
with the Gaudiya Math when he came
Correct.
back, and so there
Right,
were many things as well.
Okay, fine. So also we find there are many other examples in Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's Gopal Chapal who blasphemed Srivas Thakur. He wanted to defame him by placing all paraphernalia for Durga worship in front of his house. Then there was Gopal Chakravarti who blasphemed Haridas Thakur. So in this way, there are many examples. So the basic reason why one criticizes or blasphemes because one is envious and one wants to pull down the other Vaishnava, bring him down. So that is the main reason. And one could justify it. So Giraj Maharaj is quoting Raghunath Das Goswami. So that is like bathing in ass's urine. One thinks that one is purifying oneself by and justifying one's blasphemous nature, but actually one is simply becoming more contaminated. So what to do if one engages in sadhu ninda? To become free from sadhu ninda, one should beg forgiveness from the devotee in such a way that he be pleased to forgive us by approaching him with humility, glorifying him and serving him. Okay, so not just an external act of begging for forgiveness, but it must be genuine with humility. And so one must glorify, serve, so all that must be done. And avoid the association of non-devotees and materialistic devotees. We discussed this point in our last class, that by association with non-devotees and materialistic devotees, one loses respect for devotees and then one tends to criticize and blaspheme. So therefore, avoiding that association is also very important. Okay, so that's about blasphemy. So then there are a few items, few angas of bhakti which are quite simple, and I'm sure we know the importance of all these. Tilak and tulsi beads. So I'm sure we have heard this many times, that the Yamadutas, they don't come near a person who has neck beads, tulsi beads, and tilak, because Yamaraj gave clear instructions to his assistants not to approach the Vaishnavas. Vaishnavas are beyond the jurisdiction of Yamaraj's activities. Okay, so therefore, Srila Prabhupada has told us that this is a part of Vaishnava dress, to put on tulsi beads and tilak. Then accepting flower garlands, dancing before the deity. So I think so these things you can read, they're quite simple to understand. So regarding Archana, that we will be discussing when we discuss Panchang Bhakti, the 5 most potent items of devotional service. Okay, somebody can read this, rendering service to the Lord.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, rendering service to the Lord. It is stated in the Vishnu Rahasya, any person who can arrange for service to the Lord in the same way that a king is given service by his attendants, he is surely elevated to the abode of Krishna after death. Actually, in India, the temples are just like royal palaces. They are not ordinary buildings, because the worship of Krishna should be performed in just the way that a king is worshipped in his palace. So in Vrindavana, there are many hundreds of temples wherein the deity is worshipped exactly like a king. In the Naradiya Purana, it is stated, if a person stays in the Lord's temple, even for a few moments, he can surely achieve the transcendental kingdom of God. The conclusion is that those who are rich men in society should construct beautiful temples and arrange for the worship of Vishnu, so that people may be attracted to visit such temples and thereby offer the opportunity of dancing before the Lord, or chanting the holy name of the Lord, or else of hearing the holy name of the Lord. In this way, everyone will be given the chance to elevate himself to the kingdom of God. In other words, even a common man, simply by visiting such a temple, will be able to attain the highest benedictions, not to mention the devotees. not to mention the devotees who are constantly engaged in the service of the Lord in full Krishna consciousness. In this connection, there is a statement in the 4th canto, 21st chapter, verse 31 of Srimad Bhagavatam, wherein King Prithu says to his subjects, "My dear citizens, please note that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is actually the deliverer of all fallen conditioned souls. No demigod can perform this act of delivering the conditioned souls because the demigods themselves are conditioned. A conditioned soul cannot deliver another conditioned soul. Only Krishna or his bona fide representatives can deliver him. The Ganges water, which is flowing down from the toe of Lord Vishnu, falls upon the earthly planet and other planets, and thereby delivers all the conditioned sinful living entities. So what need is there to speak of the deliverance of persons who are always engaged in the service of the Lord? There is no doubt about their liberation, even if they have stocks of sinful activities from many, many births. In other words, a person who is engaged in the worship of deities can minimize his stock of sinful reactions coming from many, many previous births. This process of worshipping the deity has already been described, and one should try to follow these rules and regulations seriously. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so this is rendering service to the Lord in different ways. So somebody can render service to the Lord by helping in constructing of temples, or one can actually render service to the Lord by worshipping the deity. In either case, one gets the benefit of purifying oneself of the stocks of sinful activities from many, many births. So therefore, it's very important that we render service to the Lord ourselves and also engage others in rendering service to the Lord. So everyone gets benefit. So just like it is described when Bhaktivinoda Thakur was constructing the temple at the Yoga Peeth, the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. At that time, he went to the house of every person, collected 1 rupee, just to give a chance to everyone to take part in devotional service. So therefore, he was engaging everyone. So that's how we can try to engage people in serving the Lord. Then there is singing, so singing bona fide songs given by the acharyas. Then Sankirtan. What is the definition of Sankirtan? When a person loudly chants the glories of the Lord's activities, qualities, form, etc., his chanting is called Sankirtan. So Sankirtan doesn't refer to only the Lord's holy names. So it can be the Lord's activities, qualities, form, everything in connection to the Lord is called as Sankirtan. So any way in which the Lord's glories are spread is called as Sankirtan. So therefore, book distribution also can be called Sankirtan. Printing books can also be called Sankirtan. Painting can also be called Sankirtan. So Srila Prabhupada practically included all activities under Sankirtan because they're all meant for glorifying the Lord, spreading the glories of the Lord. And of course, we have the chanting of the holy names. So there's a quote from the 7th canto, 9th chapter, verse 18. So Prahlad Maharaj offers the following praise to the Lord. My dear Lord Narasimhadev, if I can be elevated to the position of your servant, then it will be possible for me to hear about your activities. You're the supreme friend, the supreme worshipful deity. Your pastimes are transcendental, and simply by hearing of them, one can counteract all his sinful activities. Therefore, I shall not care for all those sinful activities, because simply by hearing about your pastimes, I shall get out of all the contamination of material attachment. So in this verse that is being quoted over here, Prahlad Maharaj speaks about Virinchi Geetam. So Virinchi means Brahma. So Prahlad Maharaj says that I will chant the same glories. I'll chant the same glories which were sung by Lord Brahma. So therefore, whenever we sing or we chant, then it should be done in parampara. That is very important. So there's a reference in the 8th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 5th chapter, verse number 25. There also Srila Prabhupada explains that whatever songs we sing must be in parampara. And that purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that, of course, for us, the two most important songs are Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda, and Hare Krishna Mahamantra. These are the most important songs for us. Srila Prabhupada says that just these two will be sufficient to please the Supreme Lord in the current age of Kali. And of course, we can also sing bona fide songs of the Vaishnavacharyas like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Narottam Das Thakur, Lochan Das Thakur. So these bona fide songs we should be singing. Srila Prabhupada writes that we don't allow any cinema songs to be sung in the temple or. So here also Srila Prabhupada is saying, there is the Brahma Samhita, sung by Lord Brahma, Narada Panchanatra, sung by Narad Muni, Srimad Bhagavatam, sung by Shukdev Goswami. If these songs are heard by any person, he can easily get out of the clutches of material contamination. There should be no difficulty in hearing these songs of God. They're coming down from many, many millions of years ago, and people are still taking advantage of them. So why at this time should one not take full advantage and thus become liberated? Okay, so then japa. Japa is chanting a mantra or hymn softly and slowly is called japa. And chanting the same mantra loudly is called kirtan. So japa means only for one's own hearing, very softly for one's own hearing. That is called japa. So the Mahamantra can be used for japa and kirtan also. So when japa is practiced, it is for the personal benefit of the chanter. But when kirtan is performed, it's for the benefit of all others who may hear. Any doubts on any of these angas of bhakti?
No problem.
Good. So the next point is submission, Vijnapti.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Hare Krishna. Dandavata Prabhu. Prabhuji, I have a question, Prabhuji.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Prabhuji, it's not totally relevant, but since you spoke about it, I thought I'll clarify, Prabhuji. It's a little sensitive thing. You mentioned that we often hear that whenever, anybody wears kantimala, tilak, and, practice devotion service, Yamadutas don't, they will never see Yamadutas like that we hear. So often it happens, Roji, that in devotees' families or extended friend circles, sometimes some people are not practicing Krishna consciousness. But when they are in a very critical state, let's say in ICU or just about to die, I have seen devotees, going and giving them kantimala or sprinkling Ganges water or Vrindavan dust. Can you explain whether it is right or wrong, or what should be the mood, or how it should be done?
There's no harm in doing that.
Because they have not practiced anything. Maybe they were eating meat even till one day before that day. They have no clue. They are not even conscious what we are doing for them. But is that an act of? I mean, it's a mercifulness of a devotee, no doubt. But are we? Is there anything we should know? Please, if you can clarify.
See, my understanding is, there's nothing wrong in doing it because anyway, it's auspicious. Putting on the beads or putting on tilak, Ganges water, all that is auspicious, purifying. So there's nothing wrong in that. At the same time, we cannot assure about the Yamadutas. That assurance we cannot give because if we study the verses of the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, verses 5, 6, especially, then Srila Prabhupada very clearly explains in those purports that one can remember Krishna at the time of death only when one has practiced remembering throughout one's life. So it is not something which one can do at the last moment. Unless, of course, there is some causeless mercy. That's a different story. But otherwise, in most cases, one should have practiced throughout one's life. Because even if there may be devotees chanting around, even if there may be the recording of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra going on, but still, what does Krishna say? Smaran. Antakale chamameva smaran muktma kalevaram. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. So the person himself has to remember Krishna. And that remembrance of Krishna is not different from Krishna. So therefore, if you go to the 8th chapter, verse 13, if I'm not mistaken. So in that purport, and there are other purports also, where Srila Prabhupada explains, one can remember Krishna only by Krishna's grace. Because the remembrance of Krishna, holy name of Krishna, everything is non-different from Krishna. So only when Krishna is pleased, he will give his remembrance at the time of death. And for that, one must have practiced throughout one's life. Please the spiritual master and the Vaishnavas. So without that practice, so just the external things, okay, some benefit, but there is no guarantee that one can be saved from the Yamadutas if one has been leading a sinful life.
So, thank you, Prabhuji. What is the prayer from a devotee side we should have in our conscious when we are giving that to them? What should we pray? What is the apt prayer?
Ultimately, we are all dependent on Krishna's mercy. So we can only pray that the soul gets a destination where he will have a life which is conducive to devotional service. So that much we can pray, that the Lord bestow his mercy so that the person can continue his devotional life. That much we can.
Sure.
But ultimately, we are totally dependent on Krishna's mercy. Whatever he thinks is best, he knows what is best for every jiva. And so he will ultimately do what is best for every jiva. So we can only pray that whatever Krishna wills, which is beneficial for the living entity, be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to submission, Vijnapti. So as it said, there are 3 types of submission. So what is the importance? Rupa Goswami says, by making entreaties, Vijnapti to the Lord with words, the bolt on the door of liberation is released. Okay, so basically this is submissive prayers. So offering submission means basically offering prayers. So it can be done in 3 ways or 3 types of prayers. So Vijnapti are personal prayers, expressing one's sentiments to Krishna in 3 ways. So the first one is Samprathanatmika, expressing one's heartfelt desire for bhava or spontaneous devotional service. Second is Dainya-vodika, expressing one's insignificance before the deity. And third is Lalsamai, expressing one's desire for a specific spiritual perfection, involves realization of one's eternal relationship with the Lord. Okay, so now somebody can read from the book. So Srila Prabhupada has given the 3 types. After that, one can begin reading. This desiring some perfectional stage.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. This desiring some perfectional stage in spiritual life is not sense gratification. When one realizes something of his constitutional relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he understands his original position and wants to be reinstated in this position, either as friend, servant, parent, or conjugal lover of Krishna. That is called lalsamai, or very eagerly desiring to go to one's natural position. This lalsamai stage of submission comes in the stage of perfect liberation, which is technically called Swarupa Siddhi, when the living entity understands by perfect spiritual advancement and revelation his original relationship with the Lord. In
Okay, so
Padma Purana,
the Lalsamai types of prayers is on the platform of Raganuga, Bhava. So therefore, very advanced stages where one realizes one's constitutional position with the Lord. Okay, so that is Lalsamai prayers. They're on a very high elevated platform. Now, the first type of prayer is Samprathanatmika. For that, Rupa Goswami gives an example, quoting from the Padma Purana in the next paragraph. Okay, read.
In Padma Purana, there is a statement of submission in feeling by devotees praying to the Lord. My Lord, I know that young girls have natural affection for young boys, and that young boys have natural affection for young girls. I am praying at your lotus feet that my mind may become attracted onto you in the same spontaneous way. The example is very appropriate. When a young boy or girl sees a member of the opposite sex, there's a natural attraction without the need for any introduction. Without any training, there's a natural attraction due to the sex impulse. This is a material example, but the devotee is praying that he may develop a similar spontaneous attachment for the Supreme Lord, free from any desire for profit and without any other cause. This natural attraction for the Lord is the perfectional stage of self-realization.
Okay, so this is an example of Samprathanatmika prayers. So a prayer for developing a spontaneous affection for the Lord. So this is Samprathanatmika. Now the next paragraph is talking about Dainya Bodhika. Okay, read.
In the same Padma Purana, there is a statement about submission in humbleness. It is stated there, my dear Lord, there is no sinful living entity who is more of a sinner than myself, nor is there a greater offender than myself. I am so gratefully sinful and offensive that when I come to confess my sinful activities before you, I am ashamed. This is a natural position for a devotee. As far as the conditional soul is concerned, there is no wonder that he has some sinful activities in his past life, and this should be admitted and confessed before the Lord. As soon as this is done, the Lord excuses the sincere devotee. But that does not mean that one should take advantage of the Lord's causeless mercy and expect to be excused over and over again. While he commits the same sinful activities, such a mentality is only for shameless persons. Here it is clearly said, when I come to confess my sinful activities, I become ashamed. So if a person is not ashamed of his sinful activities and continues to commit the same sinful activities with the knowledge that the Lord will excuse him, that is the most nonsensical proposition. Such an idea is not accepted in any part of the Vedic literature. It is a fact that by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one becomes washed clean of all sinful activities from his past life. But that does not mean that after being washed off, one should again begin sinful activities and expect to be washed again. These are nonsensical propositions and are not admitted in devotional service. Someone may think for a whole week I may commit sinful activities, and for one day I will go to the temple or church and admit my sinful activities so that I can become washed off and again begin my sinning. This is most nonsensical and offensive and is not acceptable to the author of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu.
Okay. So this is the example of Dainya Bodhika, where one admits one's sinful activities, one's offenses before the deity, begs for forgiveness. So we find that the acharyas in many of their songs and prayers, we find this mood. Just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur is praying, Amara Jivan Sada Pape Rata Nahiko Punyera Lesha. So he is admitting, of course, that's not the situation of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but he is showing us through his example that how we need to pray that, oh my dear Lord, I've been such a sinful person in my past, so kindly forgive me. And as Srila Prabhupada is explaining that the real meaning of begging for forgiveness, confessing one's sinful activities and feeling ashamed means that one should not repeat them. So if one keeps on repeating them, there is no meaning to confessing and feeling ashamed. So Prabhupada very often gave the example of the Christians who go to church on Sunday and pay some donation to the priest and confess their sinful activities and do some atonement. but then from Monday they begin sinning again. So Parikshit Maharaj also in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam says that this is like Kunjara Shauchavat, elephant taking bath. So the elephant takes bath very nicely in the pond or the river, and once it comes to the shore, immediately takes dust and puts on the body. So what is the use of such a bathing? So that should not be the case. So Prabhupada is saying this is most nonsensical proposition. So it's not that one keeps on doing the wrong things and expects the Lord to excuse. But in any case, if one sincerely admits one's sinful activities before the Lord and begs for forgiveness, then the Lord may excuse. So these are called as Dainya Bodhika prayers. Now the next paragraph is about Lalsamai prayers. Go ahead.
In the Narada Pancharatra, there is a statement of submission accompanied by the desire for perfection. The devotee says, "My dear Lord, when shall that day come when you will ask me to fan your body, and according to your pleasure, you will say, 'You just fan me in this way.'" The idea in this verse is that the devotee is desiring to personally fan the body of Supreme Personality Godhead. That means that he is desiring to become the personal associate of the Supreme Lord. Of course, any devotee in any capacity, either a servant, friend, or conjugal lover, always has direct association with the Lord. But according to his different individual taste, a person desires for just one of these relationships. Here, the devotee is desiring to become a servant of the Lord and desires to fan the Lord, as does his internal energy, Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. He also wishes that the personal Godhead will be pleased to give him directions as to how to fan. The submissions with transcendental desire or Lalsamaya Vignapti is the highest perfection stage of spiritual realization.
Okay, so as we already mentioned that, yes, this is on the manifested on the stage of Bhava. So you can see Jiva Goswami says this. Samprathanatmika belongs to someone without the appearance of Bhava, whereas Lalsa or Laulyam belongs to the person who is manifested Bhava. So at this stage, one realizes one's constitutional position, one's eternal constitutional position, that's called as Swarup Siddhi. So then when one realizes that, then one can pray to be engaged in that particular service to the Lord. So therefore, Prabhupada is writing. So he's designed to become personal associate of Supreme Lord in any capacity, servant, friend, conjugal lover. So at that platform, one realizes one's eternal constitutional position. And so then one can pray in that way. Okay, continue reading, please.
In the same Narada Pancharatra, there is another expression of submission, wherein the devotee says, "My dear Lord, O lotus-eyed one, when will that day come when on the bank of Yamuna I shall become just like a madman and continue to chant your holy name while incessant tears flow from my eyes?" This is another perfectional stage. Lord Chaitanya also desired that a moment will appear unto me as 12 years of time, and the whole world will appear to me as vacant on account of not seeing you, my dear Lord. One should feelingly pray and become eager to render his particular type of service to the Lord. This is the teaching of all great devotees, especially Lord Chaitanya. In other words, one should learn how to cry for the Lord. One should learn this small technique and he should be very eager and actually cry to become engaged in some particular type of service. This is called laulyam, and such tears are the prize for the highest perfection. If one develops this laulyam or excessive eagerness for meeting and serving the Lord in a particular way, that is the prize to enter into the kingdom of God. Otherwise, there is no material calculations for the value of the ticket by which one can enter the kingdom of God. The only price for such entrance is the laulyam, lalsamai, or desire and great eagerness. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so this is the price of the ticket to enter the kingdom of God, a great intense greed, laulyam, to engage in the Lord's service. So of course, the one may have that great eagerness and desire, but that must also be translated in one's activities. And so when one seriously practices devotional service, then one is expressing that greed and great eagerness to actually enter into the Lord's eternal service. Okay. Fine. So that's about, so this Samprathanatmik is also basically prayers, but these are personal prayers. Okay, so these are personal prayers. And then the next item, reciting notable prayers, is repeating Shastric prayers. So as Prabhupada is right, according to great learned scholars, the whole Bhagavad Gita contains many authorized prayers, especially in the 11th chapter where Arjuna prays to the universal form of the Lord. And then again, the Srimad Bhagavatam, there are hundreds of prayers to the Lord. So devotee should select some of these prayers for his recitation. So this is reciting the prayers of the Shastras. So the previous item, Samprathanatmaka, is offering personal prayers, and this is offering prayers which are there in the Shastra. And so Rupa Goswami is quoting from the Narsimha Puran. Any person who comes before the deity of Lord Krishna and begins to chant different prayers is immediately relieved from all the reactions of sinful activities and becomes eligible without any doubt to enter into Vaikuntha Loka. Okay, then partaking of prasad. I think so we all know the glory of honoring prasad. Then drinking Channamrit. Okay, somebody can read that. Drinking Channamrit.
Krishna Prabhuji. Drinking Charnamrita. Charnamrita is obtained in the morning while the Lord is being washed before dressing. Scented with the perfumes and flowers, the water comes gliding down through his lotus feet and is collected and mixed with yogurt. In this way, the Charnamrita not only becomes very tasteful, flavored, but also has tremendous spiritual value. As described in the Padam Purana, even a person who has never been able to give in charity, who has never been able to perform a great sacrifice, who has never been able to study the Vedas, who has never been, who has, sorry, Prabhuji, who has never been able to worship the Lord, or in other words, even one who has never done any pious activities will becomes eligible to enter into the kingdom of God if he simply drinks the Charnamrita, which is kept in the temple. In the temple, it is a custom that the Charnamrita be kept in a big pot. The devotees who come to visit the offer respects to the deities take 3 drops of Charnamrita very submissively and feel themselves happy in transcendental bliss.
Okay, so that's the glory of honoring Channamrit. So one becomes eligible to enter into the kingdom of God. Okay, becomes eligible. So of course, Srila Prabhupada is very expertly, he has put all these, many of these angas of bhakti in the morning program especially. So in the morning program, frankly, you can see all these angas of bhakti are covered. So we chant prayers, we sing, then where there is Sankethan, there is Japa, there is rendering service to the Lord, there is circumambulating the temple, and there's smelling the flowers. That is the next item, smelling the incense and flowers offered to the deity. So you'll find that majority of these angas of bhakti are covered in the morning program that Srila Prabhupada is so expertly introduced in our temples. If somebody just comes to the morning program, takes part, so many of these angas of bhakti are covered. Okay, so read the next one, smelling the incense and flowers offered to the deity.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Smelling the incense and flowers offered to the deity. In the Hari Bhakti Subhodaya, there is a statement about the incense which is offered in the temple. When the devotees smell the good flavor of the incense which is offered to the deity, they thus become cured of the poisonous effects of material contamination, as much as one becomes cured of a snake bite by smelling the prescribed medicinal herbs. The explanation of this verse is that there is an herb found in the jungles which expert persons know how to use to revive the consciousness of one who is bitten by a snake. Simply by smelling that herb, one becomes immediately relieved of the poisonous effects of the snake bite. The same example is applicable when a person comes to visit the temple and smells the incense offered to the deity. He is cured at that time from all his material contamination. Any devotee coming into the temple should always offer something to the deity, fruit, flowers, incense, etc. If one cannot offer anything in cash, something else must be offered. In India, the system is that all the ladies and gentlemen who come in the morning to visit the temple bring so many things. Even one morsel of rice or one morsel of flour can be offered. It's a regulative principle that one should not go to see a saintly person or the deity in the temple without any offering. The offering may be very humble or it may be priceless. Even a flower, a little fruit, a little water, whatever is possible, must be offered. So when a devotee comes to offer something to the deity in the morning, he is sure to smell the good flavor of the incense, and then at once he will become cleansed of the poisonous effect of material existence. It is stated in the Tantra Shastra, if the smell of the garland which was offered to the deity in the temple enters into a person's nostrils, immediately his bondage to sinful activities becomes cleared. And even if one has no sinful activities, still by smelling such remnants of flowers, one can advance from Mayavadi impersonalist to devotee. There are several instances of this, a prime one being the advancement of the four Kumaras. They were impersonalist Mayavadis, but after smelling the remnants of flowers and incense in the temple, they turned to become devotees. From the above verse, it appears that the Mayavadis or impersonalists are more or less contaminated, they are not pure. It is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam, one who has not washed off all reactions of sinful activities cannot be a pure devotee. A pure devotee has no more doubts about the supremacy of the personality of Godhead, and thus he engages himself in Krishna consciousness and devotion service. A similar statement is in Agastya Samhita. Just to purify the impurities of our nostrils, we should try to smell the remnants of flowers offered to Krishna in the temple. Hare Krishna.
So this is the glory of even smelling the incense and flowers offered to the deity. So all these angas of bhakti are there in our temples. And here another point that Srila Prabhupada is mentioning is that when a devotee comes to the temple, he should always offer something to the deities. So Prabhupada speaks about this in his lectures also, that one should offer something in cash or kind. And Prabhupada says that at least a handful of rice, a handful of wheat flour, or a handful of sugar, something. And Srila Prabhupada, of course, says that if everyone who visits the temple brings something for the deities, then that's how the temples can run very smoothly. And then one does not have to go out begging to get anything for the temple. So that's the etiquette, actually, that one should not visit the temple empty-handed. And then when one comes to the temple, then one gets the advantage of smelling the incense and smelling the flowers, and so many other angas of bhakti are fulfilled when one comes to it. The next one is touching the deity. So that is, of course, for only one who is initiated as a Vaishnava, second initiated, then only it is possible. So Prabhupada is condemning this, Harijan movement. So Harijan means children of God. So everyone is a child of God. So it's not that without purification one can touch the deity. Then seeing the deity, and then observing Aarti, celebrations of the Lord. So even observing Aarti, see in the Skanda Puran, if someone sees the face of the Lord while Aarti is going on, he can be relieved of all sinful reactions coming from many, many thousands and millions of years past. He is even excused from killing a Brahmana or similar prohibited activities. So all these angas of bhakti, which Srila Prabhupada has introduced in our temples, all have a great Shastric backing. And that's the reason why Rupa Goswami is quoting all these various Shastric references to show the authenticity of these various angas of bhakti. So they're not simply sentimental. So it's not that sentimentally one is coming to the temple, seeing the deity, seeing the aarti. So it's not something sentimental. Oh, when I like it, I do it. When I don't like it, I won't do it. So that is the meaning of sentimentalism. So, but it's not just sentimentalism, it is science. So this is the meaning of science. Science means there is a Shastric authorization. So it's authorized, bona fide. And that's what we read about the 6 Goswamis. Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipunau Sadharma Samstapako. So that's how they have scrutinizingly studied all the scriptures, as you can see, to back up and to authorize all these various angas of bhakti. You can see so many references, Vara Puran, Skanda Puran, so many scriptures, Agni Puran, so many Puranas and so many scriptures have been referred to. And so therefore, they have done all this research to show that how all these various angas of bhakti are not simply sentimental, but they have a great Shastric backing. So again, observing the ceremonies and festivals, birthday of Krishna, Ramchandra, Vaishnavas, Julanyatra, and so on and so forth. Okay, any questions on these angas of bhakti?
Yes, Prabhuji. It says in the smelling the incense sticks or also touching the deity, but then I have not experienced that. But then in smelling the incense.
Was it a little louder, please? It's not clear.
It says smelling the incense. Is that okay? Is that loud now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. If smells the incense offered to the deity, he is cured at that time from all his material contamination. So when it says he's cured at that time, what does it mean? Is it just for that moment, or
So
what does it mean?
basically-
Like I have not experienced that myself, so that's why.
Yes. So basically, what it means is that it's an anga of bhakti. So therefore, one will get the effect of bhakti. That means the process of purification takes place. By practice of any of these angas of bhakti, purification takes place. So now, at that moment, so if one smells, then some purification is going to take place. But then, how much sinful contamination we have accumulated since millions and millions of births. So therefore, it's not a one-time activity. So therefore, we have to do it continuously. Then there'll be some effect. But even once doing that devotional activity, some purification will take place.
Prabhuji, we also light the incense.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay. I think the only question was because it says from all his material contamination, so that's why.
Yes, so that's true. Yeah. All material contamination means that's going to take some time. So if one continuously does it for many years and births, we don't know how long it will take for all material contamination. But every time one does that particular activity, anga of bhakti, definitely some purification will take place.
Prabhuji, this
Is it right?
Prabhuji, is this incense specific?
Wait, let him finish his clarification. Yeah. Sunil.
No, Prabhuji, done from my end. I think there was somebody else also asking that question.
Okay, fine. Okay, go ahead. Yes, Mataji, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is the incense specific to the temple or we light every day to the deity?
Yes, it can be anywhere, not specifically in the temple. Even the house can become a temple.
Even if we have not done the sthapana, like
yes.
Okay.
Because actually, even if one has photos, even the photos are non-different from the deities. We have photos of deities only, na? So yes, that's not different from the deities. So one gets the same effect.
Thank you.
Any other questions? So Prabhuji, not on this, but it is a related one where it, like in this shloka of where we read that one offer fruits, flowers, leaf, and water, right, to me. And in the Sanskrit, it says in pure consciousness. However, in the English, it says with love and devotion. So
no, both are there.
Both is,
see, if you see If you see the actual Sanskrit verse, Bhagavad Gita 9.26, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhaktya Prayachati Tadaham Bhakti Uparitam Ashnami Prayatat Manaha. So there the word bhakti is used twice, indicating love and devotion. And the word prayatatmana means pure in consciousness. So therefore, one has to be pure in consciousness, and plus one has to offer with love and devotion. So both are there.
Okay, because in English it doesn't say in pure consciousness. So the translation actually says only love and devotion.
Of course.
And
but if you see the word-to-word meaning, meaning, prayatatmana means one in purified consciousness.
Correct.
But the translation may not say it, because when we talk about love and devotion, then actually the purified consciousness is included in love and devotion. Because without purified consciousness, one cannot actually have love and devotion. So it's sort of understood. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada does not specifically put it in the translation.
Because the question to me, after reading that, the question was coming to my mind is that like when I am offering anything to God in the morning or in the evening, then I don't have a pure consciousness. So whether he is accepting it or not.
Yes. So therefore there are two things. One thing is I need to try to be in pure consciousness by at least chanting 16 rounds properly before performing any devotional activity. That's how I purify my consciousness. And second thing is one does not offer directly to the Lord. One offers through the spiritual master and the Guru Parampara. So that is how we offer. So even though I may not be pure in consciousness, but the Guru Parampara is purifying my offering before offering it to the Lord.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare.
Hare Krishna.
Any other question? Okay, fine. So we go to the next chapter, chapter 10, techniques of hearing and remembering. So hearing or Shravanam. So as Rupa Goswami says, there are three basic ways of Shravan. There's Nama Shravan, Charita Shravan, and Gunadi Shravan. So Nam Shravan means hearing the holy name. And then Charita Shravan means hearing about the pastimes. And Gunadi Shravan means hearing about qualities, etc. of Krishna. So now somebody can read from the book about hearing.
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hearing.
Right.
The beginning of Krishna consciousness devotional service is hearing. In Sanskrit, it is called Shravanam. All people should be given the chance to come and join devotional parties so that they may hear. This hearing is very important for progressing in Krishna consciousness. When one links his ear to give oral reception to the transcendental vibration, he can quickly become purified and cleansed in the heart. Lord Chaitanya has affirmed that this hearing is very important. It cleanses the heart of the contaminated soul, that he may become quickly qualified to enter into devotional service and understand Krishna consciousness.
Continue.
In the Garuda Purana, the stress on hearing is expressed very nicely. It is said there, the state of conditioned life in the material world is just like that of a man lying unconscious, having been bitten by a snake. This is because both such unconscious states can be ended by the sound of a mantra. When a man is snake bitten, he does not die immediately, but first becomes unconsciousness and remains in the comatized condition. Anyone who is in the material world is also sleeping, as he is ignorant of his actual self or his actual duty and his relationship with God. So materialistic life means that one is bitten by the snake of Maya, illusion, and thus without any Krishna consciousness is almost dead. Now the so-called dead man bitten by a snake can be brought back to life by the chanting of the Sam mantra. There are expert chanters of these mantras who can perform this feat. Similarly, one can be brought back into Krishna consciousness from the deadly unconscious state of material life by hearing of the Maha Mantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Okay, fine. So here Rupa Goswami is giving this nice example from the Garuda Puran. And that is just like a person who's bitten by a snake, he falls into an unconscious state. And then the person can be revived by chanting of mantras. So there are some expert people, Srila Prabhupada in his lectures also says, at that time also Prabhupada says there were some expert people who could cure a snake bite by the chanting of mantras. Prabhupada had experience in Mayapur. So the comatose person can be revived and brought back to consciousness by the hearing of mantras. So similarly, the conditioned souls are all sleeping in an unconscious state in the lap of witch of Maya. So that's what Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song. Jiva Jago, Gaura Chandra Bole, Kota Nidra Maya, Kota Nidra, Jao Maya, Pishachira Bole. So while you're sleeping on the lap of the witch of Maya, wake up. So everyone is in an unconscious state, being ignorant of one's true constitutional position. And so therefore, just like the unconscious person bitten by a snake is revived by the chanting of mantra, by the hearing of mantra. So similarly, the conditioned souls who are sleeping on the lap of witch of Maya are in unconscious state, they can be revived by the hearing of the Maha Mantra. And we find that, of course, there is so much glorification of the importance of Shravanam, hearing. So there are many other quotes that Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada are giving here. So you can leave one paragraph and read the next. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also recommended.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also recommended this process of hearing as a means of self-realization in the present age of Kali. In this age, it is very difficult to follow thoroughly the regulative principles and study of the Vedas, which are formally recommended. However, if one gives the oral reception to the sound vibrated by great devotees and acharyas, that alone will give him relief from all material contamination. Therefore, it is recommendation of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that one should simply hear from authorities who are actually devotees of the Lord. Hearing from professional men will not help. If we hear from those who are actually self-realized, then the nectarian rivers like those which are flowing on the moon planet will flow into our ears. This is the metaphor used in the above verse.
Okay, so here, so Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, understanding the position of people in Kali Yuga, he would very often quote this verse of Brahmaji's prayers, which is also quoted in the conversation between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramanand Rai. Gyane prayasamudapasya namanta eva. So there it said, Sthane sita shrutikadam tanuvan manobi. Sthane sita means you can be in your position, whatever occupation you're doing, you can be in that position, but shrutikadam, but here. So then even the Ajita, the Supreme Lord who's Ajita becomes Jita, becomes conquered by such hearing. And so therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given great emphasis on the process of hearing. And so therefore Srila Prabhupada also has given great emphasis. Srila Prabhupada in many lectures, he says that we have established the Krishna consciousness movement. We are establishing so many branches, especially for giving a chance to people to hear. So hearing and chanting are one of the most important activities for ISKCON devotees. And that's what Srila Prabhupada very much expected devotees to do, to engage in hearing and chanting. So in this, these are the verses from the second canto of the Bhagavatam, second canto, 8th chapter, verses 4, 5, and 6. Where we find Parikshit Maharaj is glorifying the process of Shravanam. Of course, there are so many glories of Shravanam. In the first canto, second chapter, also we know the famous verses, Shrunatam Sukada Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana, Radhyantastohi Abhadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam. And so when one gives an oral reception to the messages of the Lord, then the Lord being pleased, he himself does the cleansing of the heart. And then the next verse also, Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloki Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. So like that, there are so many verses glorifying. These are some verses which Parikshit Maharaj is speaking. Shrimata Shraddhaya Nityam Gnanatascha Svacheshtitam Kalena Nati Diyena Bhagavan Vishate Ridhi. Persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of God as Sri Krishna. manifested in their hearts within a short time. So the quality of hearing is very important. Shraddhaya. So one has to hear with faith. So it's not just like one is hearing as a religious ritual. So Srila Prabhupada very often condemns professional reciters who speak on the Bhagavatam. So both the reciters and the hearers, both are not serious. So the reciter of the Bhagavatam is doing it just to earn a living. And those who are hearing simply hear as a matter of religious ritual. And so people go, they hear for 7 days, they hear some katha, have a nice time. And then at the end of it, everything is finished. There's no transformation in their lives. Why? Because there's not much faith. People just hear as a ritual. So if we hear simply as a ritual, simply, okay, some religious activity to do. So if one simply has some material motive in the performance of hearing, then one will not get much benefits. But if one has faith that this message of the Lord is coming directly from the Supreme Lord or from his devotees, so therefore it's most essential for my progress in devotional life. So if one has that faith and conviction, then it has full benefit. And it has to be done every day, nityam. But of course, it's an austerity. So therefore he says, Grinatas swa cheshtitam. So one has to be serious. One has to take an endeavor. One has to make an endeavor. Swa cheshtitam, to hear. So like all of you are making the endeavor to hear in spite of all your busy schedules in offices and so on. So one has to make that endeavor, take the matter very seriously. Then the result will be Kalena Nati Dirgena. Very soon, Bhagavan Vishnute Riddhi, Krishna will manifest in the heart. Of course, he's already present, but now he's not manifest to us. He'll become manifest. We can realize the presence of Krishna. In the next verse, he says, Pravishnakanna Randrena Swanam Bhavasaroruham Dunoti Shamalam Krishna Salilasya Yathasharat. The sound incarnation of Lord Krishna, the Supreme Soul, that's the Srimad Bhagavatam, enters into the heart of a self-realized devotee, sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship, and thus cleanses the dust of material associations such as lust, anger, and hankering. Thus it acts like autumnal rains upon pools of muddy water. Okay, so Pravishta Kanna Randrena. So when the sound vibration enters through the ear, it has to enter. So therefore, when we're chanting the holy names or we're hearing any of the Krishna Katha, but to allow the sound vibration to enter. So therefore, we need to hear attentively. As Srila Prabhupada always emphasized, as we're chanting the holy name, one must hear. So one must allow the sound vibration to enter. Pravishta Kanna Randrena. So then it goes through the ears and the heart. And then because the sound vibration is non-different from Krishna, so then Krishna does the cleansing. Dhunoti Shamalam, Krishna. So Shamalam means all the mud or all the dirt is cleansed. And then Swana Bhava Saroruham. So the relationship of the Jiva with the Supreme Lord is established by the process of hearing. And then the cleansing takes place. And he's given an example. Salilasya Yathasharad. So it said in the rainy season, all the bodies of water become muddy. All the ponds, rivers, they become muddy, the rainy season. But then in the autumn season, when there are rains, then that acts like purifying agents. And the mud settles down and the water becomes clear. So that's why he's giving this example. And then when one becomes purified by such hearing, then what happens? Daudatma Purusha Krishna Pad Moolam Namunchati Mukta Sarva Pariklesha Pantasva Sharanam Yatha. A pure devotee of the Lord whose heart has once been cleansed with the process of devotional service never relinquishes the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, for they fully satisfy him as a traveler is satisfied at home after a troubled journey. Okay, Dhautatma. Dhautatma means one who is purified. Dhautatma Purusha. Then, so when one is purified, then the result is Krishna Pada Moolam Namunchati. He never relinquishes the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Why? Mukta Sarva Pariklesha, because he's totally freed from all miseries, all kleshas. He feels totally satisfied at the lotus feet of Krishna. And so because he's fully satisfied, then he never leaves. And then he gives an example, Panta Sva Sharanam Yata. So just like a pilgrim who goes traveling to many places, when he comes back home, he feels greatly satisfied. So similarly, a devotee who is practicing devotional service and is purified, he feels full satisfaction at the lotus feet of Krishna. So these are the effects of hearing. And so therefore, it's very important that one hear, but as Prabhupada says here, one must hear from self-realized souls, not from professional reciters. So one should be very careful from whom one hears. In India, there are many Bhagavad Kathas, Bhagavad Saptas, Ramayana Saptas, so many Saptas and Kathas take place in India. Sometimes ISKCON devotees also think that, oh, it's all right, after all it is Bhagavatam, Ramayana, so what's wrong in hearing? But Srila Prabhupada often quoted from Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami has given a warning that if one hears from such people, then it is like milk touched by the lips of a serpent. So even though it is milk, but when it's touched by the lips of a serpent, it's poison, has deadly effect. So similarly, even though it appears like Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, but when it is spoken by these professional reciters or Mayavadis, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, Mayavad Bhasha Shunle Hoi Sarvanash. So it has deadly effects when it is spoken by these professional reciters or Mayavadis. And so therefore, one must be very careful from whom one hears. So one must hear only from bona fide devotees. Then one will get the full benefit. Just like we have the famous example of Shukdev Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. Okay, so these are important points about hearing, Shravana. Any questions? Okay, fine. So we'll continue our discussions in the next class. The next point is an important one, expecting the Lord's mercy. So we'll discuss in the next class. All right. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Srila Rupa Goswami Pad ki jai, Sri Bhakti Rasam Sindhu ki jai, Samit Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram.
Thank you.
And that's